Okay, so let's make a start. The paper was exploring the sense of me, and the last paper and this paper are really about going more deeply into the Vedantic path, because it's a lot of the problems that people experience on the tantric path with difficult feelings and so on. I've noticed seem to arise when they haven't fully explored really deeply the nature of themselves and the nature of the world on the Vedantic path. So that's what we did the last couple of papers, and this one also, and it will be the same for the next one. So who would like to start? So you need to unmute yourself if you want to say anything. Rod, did you want to say something?
Well, I was hoping someone else would, but
Well, I saw you'd unmuted yourself, so that's why I was asking.
well, that was purely so I could say hello for the
All right,
beginning of the
okay.
meeting. But I'll say a little bit if because we're talking about the I, the supposed self. Before I got into non-duality, I did really quite a lot of work in on that particular aspect. I mean, that was at a time that I really wasn't aware of the distinction between a separate self and any other kind of self, except when in my investigations I suddenly sort of found it and saw it very clearly, which was really a very big surprise. Um, I don't know whether that adds to anything of the conversation we're having here, but it was that was probably almost as much as a surprise as um, finding that you are that which is aware, um, which actually, when I look back on that experience, that happened at the same time, but at the time I didn't realize it because I was concentrating. Oh well, there's this sort of self that I always thought I was, and I realized I'm not that. But that was strange. I'm going, well, that's strange because I'm still here. So, well, what's going on? But I didn't have any sort of concept about non-duality or anything like that at that time. So I really sort of forgot about it for many years. And here I am now.
Right. I think that's quite common, to have an experience like that and not really have any basis for understanding that experience and making sense of it. Yes.
Yes.
I had one similar to that. Yes, mine was similar to that. It was very young, and I remember thinking the first time I had this bout of jealousy with one of my siblings, and it really shocked me because I thought, that's not who I am. Why am I having these really heavy, contracted, negative feelings of jealousy? And it really made me sit. I remember sitting down on the path home and just thinking, who is this inside of me that's feeling like that? Like, get out of here! I'm not like that. I'm a good little person. Like, I always felt that I was a good little person, and then other emotions would come along like that, and I would think rage. Like, what's rage doing in my body? it felt foreign to me. This is when I'm really young. And I think that I was really in touch with the I am, and then having the conditioning come in and having the mind activated and all of these things happening and still feeling like there's something who I am that's peaceful and good, and not understanding why would we have emotions like jealousy? Why would we have rage? Why would we have any of those emotions? Because they don't seem to be do us any good. There's nothing good about them. Is That's kind of my feeling, my first experience of I am.
Yeah.
Hey everyone. I just wanted to say, Jenny, this is again, a perfectly timed paper for me as well. But I love on the first page how it says it's so Francis was saying it's so effortless not to know what you are. And when you think about it, the effort is in trying to figure out who you are all your whole life. Are you this? Some days you're that. It could be minute by minute or hourly, and if you just keep gently remind, that was one of my, how you say you put sticky notes all over. That was a really big sticky note one, was just release the desire to know. Just, I don't know who I am. I'm open to not knowing, and thank you. That helped me a lot, because that's just so simple, and truly it is the most effortless. It takes effort to do what we normally do, and that is just so simple.
Yes, it's beautiful, isn't it? Yes.
It is. Can I ask you the one quick question? Before this study, I studied A Course in Miracles for many, like 15 years, and they have that analogy of above the battlefield. And I don't know, I just would like to know, you had those talks with that one person. Can you direct me where I can listen in or buy a prescription for that, subscription to that? Because that had kind of, to me, this paper sort of made me think of the two levels of I'm this, but I'm not that. And it was kind of like the two levels of A Course in Miracles. But again, I didn't identify with that theory. And I definitely can see that this would lead you out of those questions. But I don't know where to find your discussion with that person.
Okay, so that's it's a series of monthly webinars that I co-host with Bill Free, and it's under the auspices of TGF TV, so that's the Teachers of God Foundation, and it's for people who, it's specifically for people who've studied A Course in Miracles. And the idea is that Bill felt that many people, because he has been a teacher of A Course in Miracles for very, very many years. And he felt when he came to Rupert's teaching, there was a sudden understanding of what the course was leading to, but he felt people got mired in the course. They got stuck in the course, and he wanted to help them find a way through that to the higher level of understanding. He feels, and I also feel, that the Course in Miracles is almost a kind of preparation
Right.
for understanding at
Right.
a deeper level.
I agree.
So that's what these webinars are about. They're part of a program, A Course in Miracles program called Evolve. I think when you subscribe to Evolve, you get all of the it's once a month for each stream. So there's a stream on healing and I think a stream on addiction and so on. I can't remember all the streams. Anyway, we're the fourth stream, which is the non-dual stream of that. Regarding levels, then in this teaching, there are not so much levels. It's more perspective. You're more seeing something from the point of view of from the absolute point of view, or from God's point of view, if you like, or you see it from the point of view of objective experience. So the levels are a little different from what they are in A Course in Miracles, and there's no judgment about that at all. There are times when we get completely stuck in experience. We've forgotten who we are. It's not a question of not knowing who we are. We've forgotten that we don't know who we are as well. And that's not regarded as a problem or a difficulty. Non-duality is only about clear seeing. That's all. And if there are times when you forget, okay, you forget. There will also be times when you remember. And the more you remember and enjoy that remembrance and act and relate from that remembrance, then the stronger that remembrance comes, and less do you find that you're forgetting. So that's the way it works. So it's not so much through practice. Course in Miracles is very much about practice, and practice is an important part of that. It's part of how it works. So at this stage, we've got beyond the need for practice, and what we're looking for is simply clear seeing.
Would you say, as far as stages go, and how we don't, the direct path doesn't have those, but would you also agree that I feel as either my understanding is deepened, or I get little glimpses of the truth, and those continue to sort of draw me back in. And what I find is, with more and more of your papers and more of both Francis's, Rupert's webinars and Jean Klein's reading, I'm understanding, and Robert Adams too, I'm understanding, like, instead of having to reread it, I'll go, oh yeah, yep. And I won't even and it's just like this inner confirmation, like you already know that because you've experienced it. Would you say that
well, that's exactly right. It's when you feel that whatever you're reading or whatever the teacher is saying to you, that is already your understanding, your experience. It just that it hadn't quite come to the surface. It hadn't quite crystallized in a way, but the words somehow brought it all together, brought it to the surface. And so that's happening. That's absolutely perfect. And then, yes, obviously your understanding, since that's your experience, it has deepened.
Yeah. Oh, good. I'm usually a very slow learner, so that's good to know. All right. Well, thank you for the paper, Jenny. I appreciate it.
Good.
Can I add something to this?
Yes, sure.
Just talking about the Course in Miracles, that's something that I've dabbled with as well. But I didn't persevere with it. I found it rather too lengthy, a sort of immense book, to go through, and 365 exercises for the year and all this kind of thing. And
I'm going to confess, Rod, that even though I'm doing these webinars, I haven't read the whole book either.
Okay.
I knew nothing of A Course in Miracles, and Bill asked me to co-host with him, precisely because I come very much from the non-duality perspective, and he wanted someone who wouldn't be in any way influenced, or not exactly contaminated, but affected by the language of A Course in Miracles. He wanted that kind of clarity, and that's so yes, I don't personally like a lot of the language. Some of it is very beautiful. Some of it is like poetry, and it's absolutely beautiful. But some of the more negative things I'm not too keen on, so I tend not to read them.
Yeah. Well, I was I read that, or some of it at least, before I really knew anything about non-duality, and I sort of I gave it up after a short while. I didn't have the perseverance to work my way through it. But interesting enough, fairly recently, a friend of mine who's quite into A Course of Miracles invited me to his Zoom meeting about the Course in Miracles, and by some strange means, I could now understand it all. You know, having the background in non-duality, and it's all there. It all became very clear.
It's pointing to
Yeah.
the same place. The Helen, the author. Well, I mean, they claim Jesus is the author, but non-dually speaking, we don't really think of it that way. She received a transmission, she said, and I think that's absolutely genuine. But she, her husband ran an esoteric bookshop. It had books from all sorts of traditions, including Advaita Vedanta, but many others, mystical Christianity, and she was brought up in Christian Science. So my feeling about what happened was that the deeper meaning of all of those things came to her almost in a dream. It's like when the mind just relaxes a bit, and you gain access to something a bit deeper, and it came to her like that. So my suspicion is she didn't fully understand herself, or all of it, when she took those notes, and then worked later to understand what she had written.
Yes, that's interesting. I wonder if you would comment on just in general on the subject of channeling, you know, and supposed other entities. I must say I've never actually experienced anything like that myself. I mean, the nearest I've had to those sort of experiences are, you know, the feeling of someone else being present, you know, something like that. But I've always sort of thought, well, channeling, this is a bit, you know, being a sort of a bit of a technical, scientific type person, I find those the channeling stories a bit, they don't sort of fit in with my way of thinking very much.
Yes, I agree entirely, and I have a different view of what channeling really is. I don't think it's non-genuine. I think it's genuine in the sense that the person feels they are receiving information from somewhere outside themselves. Now, what we're talking about usually is someone who feels themselves to be a separate entity. They feel, I am this body, I am this mind. So they feel themselves to be separate. So the mind just relaxes, and when it relaxes, because mind is not an entity in itself, it's just a limited view onto what you could call God's infinite mind, or the infinite activity of consciousness. So when the mind relaxes, then instead of that sharp, very, very tightly focused, limited experience that we have normally during the waking state, we're almost going to sleep, and all of these other thoughts and ideas and images, very, very fluid, very vague, come in. But there is no my mind. All there is universal mind, universal activity of consciousness. So more of that comes in, and depending on the kind of conditioning of our minds, I think it's more or less able to receive so some of these ideas. So Rupert gives the example sometimes of a musician receiving ideas about a Beethoven symphony and feeling that comes from Beethoven. John Lill is an example. He felt he was really in touch with Beethoven. It's a beautiful exponent of Beethoven's compositions. But that's because his mind he had this love of Beethoven. I think it's because his mind was conditioned that way, that he was open to more than just his own very focused experience that occurs during the daytime state.
Okay. Yes, that's interesting. Although I've never actually heard Rupert sort of mention, you know, channeling or these more sort of esoteric things.
He has been asked about it, and he's given
I mean, so
similar explanation to what I've just given.
Do we believe then that there are separate selves who don't have bodies?
No, there are no separate selves with or without bodies.
Well, apparent separate selves then, in the same way that we're apparent separate selves.
Well, that you're still giving some kind of existence to a separate self. No, there is nothing that that is separate. It's just a limitation of viewpoint. So no, he doesn't feel there are any beings out there that are channeling ideas in here. He says that our ideas are just arisings in consciousness, and the reason that the same idea might appear in two minds at once, which happens. I mean, it happens with me and my husband and my friends quite frequently. That is just because that idea is part of the overall activity of consciousness. It's not because there's any direct transmission between two people, two separate entities, because there are not two separate entities.
Well, I suppose we understand that as, you know, the sort of essence of being is that way, but you know, here we are, a bunch of different bodies in different parts of the world, all talking to each other. So we
are not.
Yeah.
We experience a set of bodies, which we presume are in different parts of the world, and we experience the talking together of those separate bodies. But no, we are not a set of separate bodies. I don't feel
Jenny,
separate from any of you.
Can I chime in on the conversation?
Sure. Hello, Michael.
Because I've had a direct experience of what Rod is talking about, and in a group that I run called Conscious Awareness, which is based on people that have gone through Way of Mastery, which is very much like the course. It's also supposedly written, channeled by a gentleman who was channeling Jesus Christ. And so I all of a sudden started writing poetry about 2.5 years ago, out of the blue. I'm a businessman. I've owned a couple of businesses and never thought about poetry. Really didn't like poetry. Had no. And one thing that happened to me, Rod, is I was looking at a piece of artwork from an artist I met. A lot of swirls and colors, and all of a sudden I had an experience of like lightning. I can't really explain it other than I knew something that I hadn't felt before. It was like a thunder, lightning going off inside of me with no sound and I knew on a way I wasn't able to even talk about it that something about that piece of art talked to me on a deeper level. And so eventually I wrote a poem that we put, the artist and I put it together, and we combined the poem I wrote with the art, which actually came from a piece of music that was written by a musician. And so someone asked me about that, did I feel like that was channeled? And so I thought about that, and because it was such a different experience for me, I think if I had gone through that kind of teaching and conditioning, I would have said, yes, I'm channeling. But because of the teaching of Rupert, I felt like I could answer it two ways. I could answer it from a person's perspective and say, yes, I connected with something that was greater than me in a way I'd never connected before, that produced, this poem that affects other people on a deep level. But really, that wasn't, I just knew that I wasn't reconnecting. It was just a different experience or an expression that I hadn't had before, kind of like a new piece of the first time I had key lime pie. I mean, it was, oh, okay, that's what key lime pie is. It wasn't that so for me, that's how it was for me. And people asked me in the group about levels and stuff. For me, I think there are infinite levels of mind, infinite, but there's only one consciousness. That's how it feels to me. But it's ever changing and new. So I just wanted to share that, because that really just came up for me about a week ago in the groups that I've been in, talking about levels and depth and levels and experiences and channeling and all of that. Thank you.
I mean, the reason that I sort of brought it up was actually for a very similar reason. I also run a kind of spirituality group for, I don't know if anyone's heard of the U3A, University of the Third Age. I'm sure Jenny has.
Yes.
And I run a spirituality group, and we've got one lady in that group who, seems to be in constant touch with all kinds of entities. And, it's always a subject that I hadn't given much credence to, but I start investigating it, and I find, well, that it's very, very widespread. There's lots of channeled books, and there's people who claim to be in touch with this, that, and the other entity. And it's, well, how does this fit in with non-dual theory? Well, we know that there's only one for want of the word entity, there's only one beingness, one, God's infinite being, who manifests in various ways. So how do we make, well, I suppose that's the origin of it.
But Rod, anyone who feels they are a separate entity will automatically feel that when these new and really quite strange ideas come to them, they come to them from someone else, and they then conceptualize another being from whom they come. If you feel, which is really what this paper is about, if you feel I'm not a separate entity, if you feel there's nothing, I don't do anything, I don't produce a poem arises. I don't produce music, the music arises. If you really feel that, then you couldn't even imagine a separate entity somehow communicating with you. As soon as you've imagined that separate entity channeling to you, you are automatically standing as a separate self and not standing as what you truly are.
That's helpful, actually. Yes, I hadn't really sort of clicked onto that, but um, you having said that, it's made me realise something else, that when you talk to people who don't really have any idea of these kind of things, it's very much, they're very like separate, self-oriented. It's all
Yes.
I and me and my reaction and all this kind of thing, which you don't. It sort of tends to disappear when you start doing the non-dual stuff.
Yes, and Rod, you've got such a general audience uh, in U3A, haven't you? People coming from all sorts of different backgrounds, and it would take time. You have to go really slowly and tailor what you say to the understanding of the group, and take them gently. Otherwise, it's a bit of a big shock, isn't it? Really.
Well, it is. Some of them come and they go, well, I can't really make any sense of this. I'm off.
Well, and that's why I really like the fact that I think that the course needs to have some type of structure just for beginners. Otherwise, you can be jumping in the deep end, and it doesn't really do you any good because it just confuses you. I know we're in another book discussion, Jenny, with the nature of consciousness.
Yes, yes.
I think that's excellent, and I would love to see Rupert do the same, because just by going through that, especially the second time through, it is like every word is so well written, and it's done in a sequence to be understood. And it's kind of his full deal, his full meal by the end of it. And you got to do it a couple of times. I mean, I'm on my second time, and I can see me doing it 10 times. I can see myself 10 years down the road reading that book like I've never read it before, because it has what we're trying to do here, and I'm so glad that you're actually breaking this down, and because people like myself get left behind sometimes, right? And I always am struggling and putting my hand up and saying, I didn't get the first part, right? And I'm not the only one like that. So
yes. Rupert spoke a little bit about that on the last retreat. I can't quite remember the context, but he said, well, most people come to this direct path teaching from some other teaching. So they've already, some other non-dual teaching, a progressive teaching usually. And so he's not teaching from the beginning generally, or he's doing an accelerated learning program to get anyone new up to the same standard. But people, some people can start there, and there have been a number of people in his retreats who quite young people who seem to take to it. They ask a lot of questions, they have a lot of dialogue, and eventually by the end of the week they seem to be getting there. But I think for most people, they're coming from some other teaching, often something they've gone into very, very deeply over many decades.
Yeah, I was brought up Roman Catholic, so we were never even allowed to read the Bible, but we were very religious, we prayed every day, and we said the rosary, and we went to church and went to confession, but you weren't told to read the Bible. So I understand in this worldwide view that we're in now, there's a lot of people that are from other parts of the world that come from this background that Francis and Rupert are in. I was not one of them. So all of that, the whole, other than reading Rumi and studying quite a few other, I was in Ekankar for 20 years and I studied under another yogi. So I've been constantly in spiritual studies all my life, ever from the time I was 3 years old. I was taught how to look to God. But the one area that seemed to make the big split with me from Christianity into this type of spirituality is in joining like science and religion together. And when I could feel that within me, what desire was, what's desire, what's want, what is that little zing that's always taking place that wants? I love that. That brought my attention right up because I went, yes, because that's the seeker. That's the part that's always seeking and looking and listening. And yet, when you drop that, or I don't know if the words drop, the words probably not drop, when you relax, because the seeking to me was in my mind at first, and then I understood the seeking, and then I felt it in my body after I could dilute and kind of sift through why I was seeking, like relentlessly, even and very subtly, like in meditation. Seeking in meditation to me seemed to be ridiculous. Like this is supposed to.
You seem to have all frozen. Wow. Can anyone else? I think everything is. You're coming back again now.
Oh, sorry. Did I lose you?
It says your internet connection is unstable, but I found everyone else seemed to be frozen too. But I don't know whether it's Zoom. It might have been Zoom itself.
Yeah, I'm on an island here, so it's not very good connection. Sorry.
Yes, I think that may be a separate issue, and I think Zoom was maybe getting a little bit overloaded.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So I don't know where you lost me, but I was just talking about the line between seeking and desire, and
you're breaking,
just relaxing and falling into.
You're breaking up again, Catherine.
That's okay.
Never mind.
I don't think we're going to have a good connection today.
Maybe not. I don't know whether it's just yours. It may be if you're on an island, there may be a problem, especially if a lot of other people are doing Zoom on the same island, so at the same time.
Yeah, maybe that's it. But it was just, if I can get one word, it was in the difference between seeking and in relaxing into intuition. Seemed to make a bridge that I crossed over, and then all of a sudden the intuiting, but without knowing, with understanding it.
Yes, yeah.
Jenny, I have a question. What was the businessman in Michael who looked at the artwork and had it affect him to the point where he could switch channels all the way over from business to poetry, which he had never been interested in before and never really had written before? Is that the beauty that Rupert talks about in being one, and the artist actually is responsible, not responsible, but that's the goal, is to produce something that speaks to those of us that point to our inner nature and to our self, our true self? Is that, would you qualify that reaction that Michael had with the word beauty, and that he was one with it? And
Yes,
that's the visibility?
absolutely. That was beauty, just being the collapse of being a feeling yourself to be separate, which is prompted by an object, by seeing or hearing an object. So yes, it could be a poem, or it could be a piece of music, or a piece of art, a painting, or whatever it is. And that can just, that you're just almost overwhelmed by that, but it somehow, it takes you back to that feeling of being myself, more even beyond the feeling, the knowing of myself. So yes, and remembering that work of art didn't come from a person, it came from the universe. Like all works of art just come from the totality, come from the total activity of consciousness. You can get that same sense of beauty, that same feeling of the collapse of the feeling of separation, not just from art, but from nature and from any object that you see. I have studied in the past few years a method of contemplative photography called mixang, which is a method where you just allow, instead of seeing a world of objects, you just allow seeing to come to you, and then something flashes which takes you right back to who you really are, and then you photograph it, obviously. Well, you don't photograph it, but you photograph that flash of perception. So yes, it's another route to myself. It's another route away from the feeling of separation and to the recognition of myself as pure awareness.
So that, based on your paper on page 4, that those thoughts that he had about the artwork were not personal, that was a cosmic event.
Exactly.
And therefore,
absolutely.
and therefore the actions that he started writing poetry was in line with the cosmic event of, based on what he had perceived as one with the artwork then.
Yes, yes.
All right, thank you.
Jenny.
Oh, hello, Beatrice. Lovely to see you.
Here, yeah, same here.
Okay. You're breaking up too. I'm just wondering if this is Zoom. Is anyone else seeing Beatrice as breaking up?
Hear you. I can hear you and see you.
Okay, and Jenny, you can?
Right. Yes, I.
Oh, I'm not on an island.
I'm not on an island. No, and you're not on an island, Beatrice, either. Well, I suppose you can call the UK an island, but
Is it? Shall I speak or not speak?
Yes, do speak. Yes, let's hope that it works.
I was very happy with the way you set it up. Like first you mentioned the 3 steps Rupert takes in the I am that which is aware of my experience, and then the others. And then you explain that what you're going to do is going deeper into this first one, I'm that which is aware of my experience.
Yes.
And I'm so happy you used this conversation from Francis with a questioner, because that's the difference with, for instance, the books Catherine was mentioning. Both Rupert and Francis sort of have this knack of getting people like me or like the person who asked the question right into the experience of
Yes.
what I am. And what's so helpful to me is like, I know I am consciousness, but consciousness is those words are very easily concepts. And I really liked on the first page you say, oh, I don't know who I am. But that's not the point to stop. Like I really liked how in page 2, we did this experiment with hearing. Do you hear my voice? And that I'm that which is hearing the voice. And I still don't know what that is, but with using the word reality to that, so there is a reality in that which hears the voice and the voice. Like the voice is not an abstraction, it's not a fantasy.
Yes.
The voice is reality.
Yes.
And so it has a different way, a more tuned in way of for me to be what I am and to be in this world with what I am. And it's different from reading The Nature of Consciousness. It's like my senses get involved. It's a master class into experiencing and trying to figure out what the hell it is.
Yes, exactly. Yes.
Yeah. So it's the combination of starting out with the effortless, I really don't know what I am. And then you turn it into, you did, Jenny, allowing me to not stop there, but to get in touch with the reality of what is hearing or seeing or sensing, or so I'm really grateful for that.
Yes, yes, good.
That's what
Yes.
people like Francis and Rupert and you, when you take those quotes, it goes so much in a way deeper or more pervasive than just reading The Nature of Consciousness or whatever, and
yes, it goes beyond concepts and it goes beyond objects, doesn't it? And it takes you to that experience.
Yes, it goes beyond concept, but it doesn't sort of get stuck in Maya or in fantasy. It's still scientific.
Yes, exactly.
So it's not just intuition, but it's experienced.
Yes.
So this is a really, for me, this paper and the way you were putting it up, I thought, oh God, yeah. So and then the second part that really struck me is, Robert has talked about it too, but here Francis does it, that the sense of me is not me.
Yes,
and
yes.
Rupert once likened it to very thin and delicate underwear that you take off.
Yes, exactly, yes.
Francis is doing something, he's pulling a tooth, he's a dentist, and sort of,
yes.
and so the sense of me is not the reality of me.
Yes, yes, because we are aware of the sense of me. We can we see it. We can talk about it.
Right.
But so that can't be the real me, the absolute reality. The absolute reality is what experiences the sense of me.
Yeah,
Yes.
but it brings me a lot closer to that reality
Yes.
that I am. It's very easy when I'm sort of reading about it or thinking about it to get out of touch with that reality, sort of being mesmerized with beautiful landscapes and concepts and as you said, the art can bring you back to what you are. But
Yes.
what you have done here, truth, what you have collected here, also brings me back to that place. So
Yes.
thank you.
Yes.
That was what I wanted to say. Oops.
Can I ask you something, Jenny?
Yes, yes, of course. Hello, hello, Marika.
Yeah, just following on a bit from what Beatrice said. I read the paper, printed out the paper, and I've been kind of reading it quite intently this morning. And then I kind of left it and let it just spin in my head a bit. And I was struck as well by really the simple phrase of the sense of me is not me. And then I was reading later something of Rupert and the light of the self felt in the heart as the feeling of being. And that to me felt a little bit as, I was a bit confused by that. If the sense of me is not me, but the light of the self felt in the heart as the feeling of being, that somehow feels as the same thing as a sense of me. Can you explain that?
I think it is. I think the feeling of being is the same as the sense of me, but it's at a feeling level, whereas I think the sense of me is more at a mind level rather than a heart level. So I think the feeling of being, it shines in the heart as a feeling of being, but you need to sink below that, because again, that's something you are aware of.
As a physical sensation.
It could be a sensation, or yes, a very, very subtle kind of sensation. Yeah.
Now, so can you go over that again? How is the sense of me in the body different from the feeling of being? I'm still not quite getting the difference between the two.
Yes, I think if it's I think if it's in the body, if it's a sense of me in the body, then it's probably the same as the feeling of being. If it's the sense of me as mentally, then that's in the mind rather than in the heart. So I think the two are really saying the same thing. It's like you go through a series of gateways, don't you? Or Rupert described it as what Beatrice was referring to. You take off layers of clothing, and then you get right down to the ultimate layer. You take off the ultimate layer. You take off your skin, even. Yes.
And that is not a feeling in the body.
It's not a feeling in the body. You go beyond feelings in the body. You go beyond these sort of intuitive mental feelings. You can have sort of feelings in the mind as well as feelings in the body.
Yeah.
Sort of mental intuition.
Yeah,
and it's below all of that as well. It's below everything.
So it's more a sense of something rather than a physical feeling.
It's not even a state. It's the removal of all states. I would call it to what is always essentially there and covered over by states.
Which is
Not
not
not not.
the core feeling,
Yeah.
but it's more an awareness of presence.
Yes,
I'm
it's
trying to find kind of words.
anything, any word that you use is always
Okay.
ends up denoting an object, doesn't it? It's a problem. It's a problem with our language. It's it.
Maybe that's why I find it so hard to talk about
Yes,
these matters, or even if I do take the plunge and I ask a question, or I feel whatever word I use, I'm always kind of missing the point here.
Yes, it's the only way is to describe it as a really as a process, although Rupert doesn't really like that either. But it is like a process of removing everything that you are aware of. You remove, and you just it's a sinking down into nothingness, into an emptiness. It's a sinking down.
That sinking down now I'm familiar with.
Yes.
What I lately have is not so much a sinking down, but a rippling out.
Yeah, well, that's fine, and expanding outwards.
Yeah,
but with everything else on the surface, and
yeah, but
nothing else
and
there.
everything being part of that.
Yeah, yes. When you the way Rupert describes it is that he always tries to take people to the pure essential nature of myself below everything that we can be aware of, and that's nothing that could be describable, because it's really like falling asleep. It's falling into deep sleep. It's that nothingness, emptiness. But then when you resurface into the world of objects, then everything has a transparency to it. So that, yes, there are all of these almost coverings on top of that essential awareness, essentially what I am. But those coverings are transparent, and it shines through all of those. So all objects, all our perception, all our seeing shines with that light of what we are.
Yeah, that's yeah.
Mute. Unmute.
Hello, Alice. Well, you were unmuted, but you've muted yourself again.
Okay. Am I okay now?
You're okay now, yes.
Well, I just wanted to say that cosmic events happens from childhood. I remember when first I went to my parents.
Just to stop you there, everything is a cosmic event, Alice.
Yes,
it's
yes,
not
but I mean, it's so real.
Yeah.
That when you realize it as knowing, everything becomes so simple and so beautiful.
Yeah.
From childhood, for example, my parents used to put me to an English school, and I used to escape from school, go home, which was far. I was only 5, and I used to go to French school. This happened a few times, different schools, and I went to French different schools as well, until I met my first teacher, who was French. That is my husband. When I met my husband, it was really a cosmic event as well. painting.
Everything throughout
Everything
your
is,
life,
yes,
Alice, was a
definitely,
cosmic event.
definitely.
Not just the special things, everything.
I know that. I know that.
Even the things you
I
thought were
know
bad, or everything.
everything.
Even the
And
trivial things, all cosmic
learning,
events.
I mean, experiencing knowing, trying as much as possible to live through knowing and not through me. It transforms you, definitely. It's a different thing. Seeing, feeling, listening, beauty, because I have a heart of an artist. I used to paint. Definitely, it's a cosmic event when you are creating. Definitely, it's beautiful.
Yes.
I love what Rupert is teaching. It's incredible. It's really what we are all loving it, and it's a privilege, definitely. Thank you.
I think some of these cosmic events seem more significant than others because they seem to sort of lead us in a certain direction or have a certain intentionality behind them.
Well, that's really something that we superimpose onto our experience, though, isn't it?
It is, yes.
And that
But it doesn't.
That will come from our conditioning, probably.
Yeah, yeah.
Yes.
But probably we've all had this feeling that we've been led in a certain direction.
Yes, it doesn't mean that we have. It just
No, it's just that we ended up here, didn't we?
we did end up here, but yeah, there are plenty of people who didn't end up here. But no, it's just part of the unfolding of consciousness, and yes, the separate self likes to feel, oh, I was led here, but there's no I that was led anywhere. There is only here, and yeah.
We have to leave a little bit of romance in it, though, don't we?
We leave some poetry in it. Yeah.
Hello, Jenny. This is Linda.
Hello, Linda. Lovely to see you.
First, thank you so much for the work that you do to put together the paper and the links to the videos that you recommend that are on YouTube. That is so helpful to me. This is just like, I think, my third or fourth meeting that I've come to since I've been introduced to non-duality. Most of the time, I would love to speak, but I don't think I can even form an intelligent question.
Well, just form a question rather than an intelligent one.
But here's kind of how I feel as I explore this with you and the group and the books and the videos. Is I feel like I'm at this banquet of non-dual teaching, and every little video, everything is like a little morsel, a little sample of, and that's consciousness, and now we're talking about cosmic events, and now what's channeling. And so the discussions are so beautiful. I love it. I just feel like kind of like a baby bird, with its mouth open, like just drop in morsels, because I'm being, I don't know, slowly changed the way I'm thinking. And I come from a background of A Course in Miracles, so I love the discussion. That's how I met Jenny, through like the book club and TGF TV, those little groups that we have. And I was just drawn to this very simplistic view that we make super complicated, right?
Yes, absolutely. Yes.
So I'm just filled with gratitude that for all you do with the group and with your patients. Sometimes I feel like, wow, I'm getting this, and then it's like I have no idea what they're talking about.
You don't need to worry about the bits where you don't know what I'm talking about. you only need you only need a little bit. You know, there's part of Rupert's path is the tantric path, and there's part of the tantric teaching which a lot of what he does is based on. It's called the Vijnana Bhairava, and the Vijnana Bhairava is a set of meditations. It's just sort of 2 lines. Each meditation is 2 lines of text, and that's 2 lines of text is one meditation. And I can't remember how many there are of them, but there's quite a lot, and maybe about 100. And what the person originally, this is a very ancient text, what the person originally said was that you only need 1 of those, and that will take you the whole way. And Rupert's teaching is a little bit like that. So you don't need to eat the things you don't like. just eat the stuff you really like.
Well,
and don't overeat either.
Well, I love the teachings about John Smith and King Lear. I love that so much. I totally get it. But when he explains with those, you know, metaphors and analogies, and then of course the screen, which I've talked to you about that before, and I'm like, oh wow, that just totally makes sense to me. In the brain way, you know, I want to get beyond the mind and the brain. And then the dream with Mary and Jane. All those analogies that he puts in his books and his videos are, it really helps me so much. And like I said, thank you for, you know, all this that you're doing. Thank you.
It's lovely to see you, Linda.
Hi, Jenny.
Hello.
You hear me?
Hi, Rick. Yes.
Yeah, again, just to reiterate what Linda said, it is really appreciated what you do. It's amazing. One of the things I wanted to mention is it seems like, I guess you could say, evolution's worked very hard to kind of make us almost professional storytellers. We're constantly not only telling others, but telling ourselves some kind of spin, some kind of story. And even in regardless of how good the teaching is, we seem to kind of do the same thing, or at least until we don't. And, you know, we'll say one side of our face, well, yeah, everything is a cosmic event, but then we'll claim it, okay?
Yes.
And then the very next sentence. So it seems like almost a matter of always catching ourselves and what the mind's doing. Always making it about me, you know, that no one's going to argue the sense. There is a sense of self, but it's just a sense. But we want to sterilize everything and make it about me. And another example would be that somehow the me to correlate understanding of a teaching with a better me, a better mood, better experiences. And really that's not it. And you see that all the time. And some teachers address it, but they can't address it continuously. They won't have any students left. You know what I mean? But it's just our constant tendency to jump in and personalize it. And granted, with understanding, peace, tranquility, that comes, but it's not about that in and of itself. Because the me is what? The me is defined by struggle, I would say. So I want to you know, what your comments, even the teachings, I think regardless of how good the teachings are, would you agree that they're really all concessions, as beautiful as they sound? For example, everything appears in consciousness. That's true, but again, it's conceptual in. There's no in or out. You see what I'm saying?
Absolutely, yes. It's not possible for a teaching to be anything other than a concession, and it's really a question of choosing the right concession to answer a particular person's question, partly that, but it's also choosing a concession which takes you closer to that real feeling understanding of what you are. And
Yes.
that's a skill that that Rupert and Francis have to do that.
Beautifully said.
Our minds work automatically in subject-object duality, and therefore our language automatically is dualistic. And so therefore our minds cannot conceive of reality as it is, and certainly cannot communicate reality as it is. Our language can only point to that.
Yes. I liked in your article when you referenced, I think it was Francis said it was like pulling teeth. And I think
Yes.
that's a great analogy because it is.
Yes.
You know, it's like pulling teeth when you're so used to thinking or coming to a certain conclusion. You kind of catch yourself doing it, but it is kind of like pulling teeth. And
Yes.
it's not always a comfortable process.
Yes. Yes, it's just it's exactly as you say. It's catching yourself when you're doing that, and there's this sudden remembering. Oh, no, it's not like that. I'm not this separate entity. I'm that's inventing this story about what's going on.
Yeah.
I'm not that at all. I'm just that in which this experience is arising.
One very last quick comment. You ever notice, or at least for me, you could hear something 100 times and nod, you think you got it, what the words are talking about. Then you hear it for the 1,000th time, and it takes on an entirely different meaning. Okay?
Yes,
You know, entirely different meaning.
Yes.
An example is, I think Francis said that any understanding doesn't occur in thought. You know, it's the absence of thought. And I heard that many times, but I guess you hear things when you hear it. I just thought that was so amazing. That,
Yes, yeah.
As many times you hear it, you don't always get it.
Yes. Well, one of the things I noticed, and Rupert said exactly the same thing, because he and I attended the same school of Advaita Vedanta originally, and he said when he first came to Francis's teaching, he thought to himself, why didn't anyone tell me this before? And then later on, he realized, looking back at what he had been told, that they had. But of course, they hadn't understood it, and he hadn't understood it. But now, coming back to those words, he did understand. And I felt exactly the same thing.
Oh, it's miraculous. Well,
Yeah.
please keep writing. I find your writing is very, very, very good, and very insightful and powerful.
Good.
So I hope you continue to do that. Okay, thank you.
Can I come in, Jenny?
Yes, hello, Leon.
Hi.
Hi.
Once again, I really enjoyed the paper. And I'd like to ask you, when you mentioned that it was a concept, sorry, a concession.
Concession, yes.
Is it the same as a concept? In that,
all concessions are concepts, but not all concepts are concessions.
not all, okay. But when you were explaining just now, you were explaining.
Yes, we were talking about words which were used to point to a reality which was beyond words, and so those words are a concession to the person's current understanding. So you're trying to take someone from their current understanding to something that's closer to reality, to their true experience.
Right. Okay. So it's not a theory or a concept.
Well, it is a concept, not a theory. No,
Okay.
So it's a concept. So awareness is a concept. But if we keep it as a concept, then that's an object. We are objectivizing it. So the word awareness is used to point to that, whatever that is, which is aware of my experience.
So
And
there's a conception.
so it's a concession. The word
Okay.
awareness is a concession, and it's also in being a concession, it's also automatically a concept.
Right, okay. Another couple of points on the paper. I very much appreciate the difference between me and the concept of me, and I understand it. I also understand the fact, sorry, I've forgotten the thing. What I don't understand is the paper says that our thoughts are not ours, and they are actually cosmic, part of, it's the awareness, the cosmic awareness. Now, when you make a shopping list, as that man did as an example, is that also a cosmic event?
Oh yes, all shopping lists are cosmic events. And the making of them are cosmic events.
There's nothing, okay, your own mind does not create
you say you're using the words your own mind.
It's
what
not
is
your
the
own
you
mind.
that you are referring to?
Okay, I understand, yeah. So it's the action, it's not my own mind, is what you're saying.
Well, what is the what is the me that owns a mind?
The me that owns the mind is, okay, awareness.
Yes, and the mind is simply a limitation of awareness. Yes.
Right. But we all have
it's
our
just a little viewpoint. It's like we've talked before, like looking through the keyhole into the activity of awareness. It's a tiny, tiny view into the activity of awareness. That's all mind is.
And when bad things happen, for example, that's because we haven't understood that we are part of that awareness.
Well, who would say that it was bad?
Well, let's say you have an evil thought towards somebody.
Who says that's bad?
Well, if it's harming somebody, isn't that bad?
Well, from a point of view of a separate self, yes, you feel, I don't want to be harmed. I'm a separate entity. I don't want to be harmed. Therefore, if I were to harm someone else or have a harming thought about someone else, then that is a bad thing. So separate self divides thoughts into good thoughts and bad thoughts. But thoughts are just thoughts. From awareness's point of view, it's neither here nor there. All thoughts are just neutral. There's no good or bad. Because that's a division into duality. It's only from the point of view of a separate self that there could be anything good or bad.
So if something like
you know the beautiful quote from Hamlet, I think it is. There's nothing either good or bad, but thinking makes it so.
Interprets it, it gives it meaning, yeah.
Yeah.
And all these dreadful things that happen to, let's say, children being killed and whatever, that's
the activity of awareness, and it's just what happens. It's just part of the unfolding of the activity of consciousness from the point of view of a character in the dream. Then probably we would take action to prevent dreadful things happening if we were in a position to take action. but from the point of view of consciousness, consciousness doesn't see anything as being good or bad. It's everything is as it is. It's entirely neutral. It's just a vibration of consciousness, nothing more.
So it was meant to be.
Not even it was meant to be. It just is.
Okay.
Meant to be. Has a kind of flavor of time about it. It just is. Well, whatever is.
Okay.
Can I say something about it?
Yes, sure, Luke. Hi, Luke. Lovely to see you.
Hi. Now, maybe, well, what you were just saying about good and bad, the nice thing about that is if you have that understanding, then the need to behave in a way that we would, from the point of the separate self, see as bad, kind of also disappears, isn't it? If we don't look at things anymore from the perspective of a separate self, then the need that many separate selves have in order to prevent loss and to fill up lack and so on, kind of also doesn't exist anymore.
It doesn't exist. We naturally act in the world based on a feeling of being an integral part of the world, and of everything and everyone being ourself. So it would be natural to behave in such a way that a separate self would regard as good. Because there's a kind of inbuilt feeling in all separate selves that certain types of behavior are bad, and generally those types of behavior come from extreme feelings of separation. I mean, there are good types of good behavior that also come from extreme feelings of separation. You might want to be as a separate self. You might feel I want everyone to appreciate me, to like me, to feel that I'm doing good in the world, and then you might go around doing all sorts of wonderful things to help people, and that's fine, but that still would still come from a sense of separation. But there's, with this understanding, there's a kind of neutrality about everything. There's not really any condemnation of behavior. There's no moralizing to it. There's seeing what happens, and it's natural for a body mind to recoil from children being harmed, or adults being harmed, or animals being harmed for that matter, or even art objects being destroyed. Is a natural feeling of recoiling from that which is in the body mind. But there's not a judging of others as being perpetrators of that act.
Can I ask something about it, Jenny?
Yeah, yes, Marika.
What Rupert calls the secret outrage. How does that connect with what we're talking about now?
Well, that's what I was referring to as the recoiling from something. Your whole body feels this is not in line with what I understand. Where this is how can this how can this arise? And you feel that energy welling up within your body, and that's totally natural. That's a bodily reaction, and it's also a mental reaction too. But underlying that, there's still that feeling of peace and neutrality. It's a neutral kind of peace. Peace. It's not peace as a state of mind. It's a peace that's free of, that's ultimately free of any kind of agitation.
It's not personal.
It's not personal at all. No.
That's,
No.
the,
Yeah.
that's the big difference, I think.
Yes. Yes.
It's not done to me. It's not and I am affected by it, but an outrage against what you see is being done.
It's
against.
It's outrage against. It's an outrage against truth, in a way.
Love.
The truth of our being, and because the truth of our being is impersonal, that there are no persons.
Can that peace penetrate others around you?
What?
Can it infiltrate others around you? I think probably it can.
And it's not, that is to me very intriguing, because maybe it's just the I again, maybe it's the mind again trying to take control over it. As who was it, Rick? I love what he was saying about that. It's like, regardless of how you package it, it comes back to, this is about making me better, or the I better. So as a concession, you have to say, okay, I, you're in there, but there's just something very thrilling and beyond anything else we know that infiltrates or goes out, and actually other people can feel that. And
Yes.
I get that with Rupert, I get it with Francis. You know, it's something that, you know, that's worthy of working towards, even though that sounds like a concession for the small I. At some point, it's okay, because it will drop. Is that correct?
It's simply the clear understanding of the complete neutrality of everything, the complete sameness, the indivisibility of everything. It's a clear understanding of that, and that is the backdrop on which all of manifestation, all of the dreams of infinite consciousness play out. And when we have a dream at night, some of our dreams are nightmares. Some of our dreams are very happy, enjoyable dreams. And we don't mind whatever dream is playing. It's okay. It's just a dream, and that's really like it is. There's obviously, as a character in a dream, then we naturally behave in a way which feels right for our body mind. And if our body mind has been pervaded by this understanding, then our behavior will be different from if it hasn't been. And that's that. But there's no sense of good or bad or right or wrong. It's not it's not needed, and it as absolute concepts, it doesn't exist. Everything is okay as it is.
Would that correspond more or less with the old biblical story that mankind was thrown out of paradise after Adam and Eve, they ate from the tree of knowledge of good and bad?
I don't think we, when we recognize our true nature, we're thrown out of paradise. I think the knowledge of good and bad probably happens early in childhood. That's perhaps part of the growing up process, and part of the development of the feeling of being a separate entity. And then I guess suffering does occur, and maybe that's the end of paradise. But we find paradise again, but in a different way, accepting, seeing all the good, what we previously conceived of as good or bad, but seeing it as just a pattern of the unfolding of awareness.
Can I say something?
Yes.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, I mean, a practice that might help would be to ask yourself, do I experience any evil essence or good essence from other people or from things? And see if you can find any sort of evil or good essence in any object or person. This is a concessionary practice.
Yes, that's a good practice. Good suggestion, Rod. Yeah. Yeah.
Jenny, if I may.
Yes. Hi, Narina. Lovely to see you. Hi.
Thanks so much for the papers. They're really precious. On this subject especially, a thing that struck me during the week-long retreat, many things struck me and I'm very confused on some subjects, but especially pertaining to this particular argument, actions, thoughts that are good and bad. My understanding, which kind of surprised me, of Rupert's teaching, was that, of course, there is only one intelligence in the universe, which is awareness. And the separate self thinks, it originates, and thoughts, the actions, I think he said, it lay claim to them, but they all arise, but really has nothing to do with it because they arise from awareness. But at the same time, when he said that, they arise from awareness, they arise from truth and love. But at the same time, he said that the others, which let's just, make a concession and use the negative thoughts or actions, arise from the separate self, which arise from a sense of lack and of separation. So to me, there's kind of a differentiation in good and bad thoughts, actions and feelings that he states basically.
Yes, and in fact, that's you're really seeing things or expressing things from two different points of view. From the absolute point of view, everything arises from awareness. Everything is a cosmic event. All our thoughts are cosmic events. What he is saying from a relative point of view is that some of those thoughts and some of those actions are filtered through, is the expression he usually uses, are filtered through the belief in being a separate entity. In other words, they're conditioned by the belief in being a separate entity. Or they, another way of saying it would be that they arise from our habit of feeling ourselves to be a separate entity. Now that may be an old habit. We may now realize that no, we're not separate, that all we are is awareness, that which knows my experience, and we may feel that we are everything, but at the same time there's this old habit, an old pattern which has been set up in that region of the activity of awareness which our minds have access to, because they don't have access to the whole lot, they have access to a little bit. And in that region there are patterns, and those patterns, some of those patterns will revolve around the belief in being a separate entity. So he is referring to actions that are filtered through or conditioned by that belief and the thoughts that precede those actions, because actions will always be preceded, or generally preceded, by a thought of some kind.
So I understand that we have to always refer to an absolute and a relative, but actually there is only an absolute.
Yes, absolutely. There is only an absolute.
That's
if you feel yourself as that, then there's no need to get involved in the relative, except that you see what is going on, what is happening at a relative level in the manifestation, but you see it through your understanding. Everything becomes much more transparent. You're seeing it through the understanding that really this is just an occurrence in a kind of dream, that I'm the dreamer of infinite dreams. And in order to see the things that are happening in my dreams, then I see that manifestation through the artifice of a character in that dream, and then that character does whatever it does in the dream. But ultimately, behind that character, there's the knowing and the feeling that is not my reality. My reality is that which sees the whole of the dream, the whole of the action, the whole of the world that I perceive, and not just the character.
Yes,
can I oh, sorry.
Let Narina carry
Yes,
on.
yes.
Because this is obviously a problem that
yes.
She's been struggling with through the retreat.
Yes, I'm gonna.
Thank you, Jennifer. Definitely, this retreat, this past retreat was really good for me, but at the same time, it really brought up a lot of, puzzled me a lot. Maybe, just as you said, because I've been kind of, basking in awareness, and I was jolted back by some of the questions and answers, and it got me into a separate and more of a separate self, mind, body mode. And so it started triggering all these thoughts, and as you could you could hear from the lack of clarity in my question when I posed it to Rupert. I'm all over the place. I'm back into the thinking mode, into my mind, into my complete separateness. So in a way, I am trying now to stay away from concepts and labels, and as much as I love them, because my mind loves to think and loves to, extrapolate. But I think that I need to step back again and go back into just.
I think that's right, Narina. Recently, with the webinars and the retreats, I've seen that things have changed from the way they used to be pre-COVID.
Yeah.
When we had residential retreats, and we were all there together at Buckland Hall or wherever it was. And I think that the change that has happened is that a lot of people are struggling at the relative level. And so a lot of the questions are coming from that relative level. What I've been trying to do in the last few papers is to redress that balance, because I think an awful lot of those issues get resolved by going more deeply into the absolute level, going inwards, and just exploring more deeply. Everyone had that basic understanding, you could tell. All of the people who asked questions had that very basic understanding. However, my feeling was that they had got sucked into what was going on in the world, which is absolutely unprecedented, extraordinary events. Everyone's life in one way or another, and to some extent or another, has been turned upside down. So it's natural that this happened. But I think you're absolutely right to yes, to just go back and yes, spend more time being yourself, abiding as yourself, and relating to the world, and not just other people. Maybe you're seeing less other people, fewer other people in the current circumstances, but the objects, all the everything that surrounds you, all the buildings that you see out of your windows, or the trees, or whatever, feeling and knowing that all of those are myself. And I think spending as much of your time as you can, just seeing but more importantly, feeling from that perspective, I think will resolve probably all the stuff you were struggling with.
Yes, I totally agree. Thank you for clarifying that. Thank you so much, Jenny. You're precious. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Hey, Jenny.
Hi.
Jenny,
Yes.
If everything is a cosmic event, which I believe it is, then one could conclude that nothing's personal.
Absolutely. Quite right.
And also that includes the mind, and our thinking is also a cosmic event.
Yes.
It's not a mistake. And for me personally, I've learned to go to war with my mind. There's no end to it. It's a mistake. And I've even called myself using spiritual teachings almost as an escapism, rather than using it almost like, well, everything's awareness, it doesn't matter, that sort of thing. Rather than, and somebody mentioned being confused. Personally, I think being confused is a very constructive thing, because I think the more effective the teachings almost have a destructive quality to them. They start eating away at what we think we know and our beliefs. One of the things that helped me in my thought process is just, if everything's cosmic, then keeping things impersonal. In other words, you're going to have opinions and judgments. You just are, you're conditioned. But try to see the impersonal nature of it. In other words, that makes you more open to see the opinion of others, to look at your own judgment, not to condemn them, but just to see them. Again, that impersonal nature. Whenever I find myself being personal in any regard, I consider a really red flag. But, you know, I find that just being open to everything, because the mind wants to do it, turn any teaching into do's and don'ts. I need to think less. I need to judge less. You know, and I think that's just more of the same. That's more of the mind reinforcing mind.
Yes,
Ego
yes, exactly.
resisting.
Yeah.
I just wanted to say, do we have time?
Can I have one question, please?
Can we just? Michael was trying to get in earlier. Richard, can you come back just after Michael?
I'll be real.
Michael.
I'll be real quick. That way, Richard has what? Does this go to 11 o'clock or is this? Yes. I'm in Colorado.
I'm in a different time zone.
15 more minutes, right? I just wanted to say, Rick, following what you were saying, is for me, what's very scary in the United States is, and also what I find in my group is people they have not really delved down deep enough to see the core belief that lies in a subconscious kind of, but you can see by the behavior that is repetitive that there is a belief there that hasn't been looked at or brought to the light through awareness. And I know it for myself that I'm not afraid to go as deeply as I need to go to lessen that habitual kind of responses. And yeah, at first it was really scary, but you know, that's where the teaching, Rupert's teaching, really struck home for me. Was there's a core there that is deeper than any pain and any suffering, and that doesn't change for me. And so Annie, I think you probably know Annie. A lot of you know Annie. I met her in Buckland Hall, and we had lunch together. And Rupert is famous for saying that he didn't have an enlightenment event. You know, it was, and her and I were having lunch, and she told me about these experiences she had were fantastic in mine. And she said a beautiful thing to me. She said, God gives us each what we exactly need at the time we need it. And that is just...
That's lovely, yes.
Well, yeah.
Richard. Hi, Richard.
Yes, hi. Thank you, Jenny. I just have one question because Nerina, you kind of triggered this feeling that I'm having lately. When you see someone else being, you know, really killed on the street, and coming from the absolute idea of we are one, you kind of have this feeling within you that you have to do something about it because you care of all. So I'm just trying to ask how to deal with that feeling, because you're being attracted to that relative stage that you don't want to go.
Yes, I mean, that's really the sacred outrage that we were talking about. You see someone killed on the street, and maybe at the time you can't stop them being killed on the street. You're maybe a distance away, or you don't have the strength to do anything about it. So yes, there's this feeling of outrage that wells up in your body and gives rise to thoughts in your mind. Now, there may be something that you can do about that. The first thing you can do about that is to, as much as possible in all of your interactions with everyone, you see, whether it's people out on the streets or in shops, if you're able to go to shops, or wherever, to see and feel them as yourself, because that affects them, that they in some way that because minds are not really separate, so there is no such entity as a separate mind, that infects them as well. So that's the first thing that all of us can do, whether or not we've seen anything as horrific as that on the streets. We can do that anyway. But there may be in your particular community, there may be initiatives going on, or you may want to start some kind of a initiative which helps avoid the whatever issues are arising which provoked that killing on the streets. And maybe you can do that, or maybe not. If you're really standing as awareness, it doesn't matter if there's nothing you can do. That's okay. But and equally, if there is something you can do, you allow the body mind to do that. You are not a separate entity actually doing anything, just allowing the body mind to do that. A thought enters the mind and the body follows it, and that's absolutely fine. But the test of whether that's really an impersonal action, really coming from your deepest understanding that you're one with everything, is whether it matters to you, whether you care, whether that is effective and achieves its objectives or not. And if you're really standing as awareness, it doesn't matter whether it achieves its objectives.
But that is still no, how do you say that? If I feel like I have to do something about it, it feels like I'm going to the separate self itself, right? I can feel
If you
that.
if you feel I, a separate self, have
Yeah.
to do something about it, then
Yeah.
yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
And
But if you feel no, this this action does not express the love and intelligence that I know I and everything and everyone else to be. Why don't I do such and such? And then there's a kind of, again, there's a neutrality about it, but you just you would just allow that action to manifest. Whatever action thought has provided for you, you allow that action to manifest. But it doesn't matter if it works or not. Maybe it will work. Maybe it won't.
so the other side is, instead of going to that place, you can, as Rupert says, sink the mind to into the source, and
Yes.
find peace in there. But that perspective feels like a retreat into, the peace that you always felt, into your house, in the safety, and not going
Yes,
out. Do you
I
understand what I'm
know,
trying to say?
I know exactly what you're saying. I know what you mean. Initially, when we come to this teaching, it is like that, and that's the best way of finding that piece of our true nature, is to retreat from all the objects of perception, all of our sensations, all of our thoughts. We retreat from everything that is not essential to us, and we sink below all of that. And in that complete nothingness and emptiness, um, that in itself is the piece of our true nature, because there's nothing moving there. But then after that, that's just an initial step. But after that, we emerge back into the world of manifestation. We allow, we see our body minds as characters in the dream, and those characters are performing actions, but those actions are coming from that deep peace that we have discovered in the nothingness, the emptiness, which is our essential self. So it's something we get used, we get familiar with that. It's easier to be familiar with that in circumstances which are not as extreme as someone killing someone else. So if it's just someone saying something not very nice to someone else, then that might be a starting point rather than a killing.
Okay,
And
thank you.
Richard, one of the other ways for me to deal with those situations is to see, like, see clearly the other person, the one who is doing the killing, as being the same as I am, as we are.
Yes, and not just the other person, but everything around.
Yes.
It's if you're focusing on a person doing an action, then that ultimately, this is where I disagree with Rupert's meditation on this. It's in my experience, it's not just the person; it's the whole scene. It's everything. Everything is myself in that moment. It feels that way. The person doing the killing, all the bystanders, the pavement, the sky, the trees, the lampposts, everything is myself, not separating out that person. I feel I don't feel that's right. It's one of the very few areas where I disagree with Rupert.
It's just that we're conditioned, all of us are conditioned very deeply of blaming a person. I agree with you, and that ultimately we are the lamppost and everything.
Yes.
My condition is very deeply into blaming the other person or whatever. And so it helps me as a step in between to start out to not do that, but just to open up to that person, not judge the person.
Yes, I can see that as an intermediate step. Yes, yes. I've got a question on the message board from Sue Hawthorne. She is her system is unable to provide audio or video at the moment. I hope she will eventually. And she says. About yesterday's Zoom meeting, I spoke to a gentleman about going deeper below the layers, going beneath. Does that eventually come with remembering and sinking back each day? And Sue, this is really what I've been describing earlier. It's where it's not really a practice. But it's whenever you feel inclined to do so, whenever your attention is not required by the world, just allowing that attention to sink back into its source. So sinking back beneath all your perceptions of the world. So it's easier if you close your eyes because that cuts out all of the seeing, which is our strongest sense. But hopefully you're in a quiet room, so you're sinking below any sounds that are existing. You're not allowing the mind or attention to focus on those sounds. So you sink below that. You sink below any thoughts. You don't try to get rid of thoughts. Just allow thoughts to carry on, just as they are, and you sink below those. If there are any sensations in your body, maybe you've got a slight pain in your knee or somewhere, you sink below that as well. It's best not to do this when you've got really strong pain because it doesn't work so well. So you choose a time when you're not in a huge amount of pain. And you sink below all of that, and it's really like falling asleep while remaining awake. And that's the first step to, which is just a step of recognition of what you essentially are. And then when you resurface into the world of perceptions and sensations and thoughts, then you find that peace and that understanding which has been gathered there then infiltrate your experience. It pervades your experience, and everything seems more dreamlike, more transparent, and that should work. And yes, eventually, as you say, eventually every time you do that, then it strengthens that kind of connection with what you truly are. And the times when you get lost in experience become less and less and less. And after a while, you don't need to, although I think probably most people do, and I do, and I know Rupert does, that you don't necessarily need to sink right the way down to that. It's called consciousness without objects, the feeling of being asleep or being awake. That even that same understanding and that same feeling of being my essential self, then it just expands, and it fills most of your day. There might be some times when something extreme happens, when you're taken away again, and you feel a contraction back in the body. So I hope that helps, Sue, and I hope that very soon you'll be able to get your equipment working, and we'll be able to see and hear you on these webinars. Luke, did you want to say something? Your picture has come up on my screen, which probably means you're unmuted.
Yeah. What you were just saying, that you didn't fully agree with Rupert by not including the whole surrounding. What does he do different than I didn't fully
He produced there was a meditation on one of the webinars in which he was talking about that the police officer in the US who killed the person of color, and that was put up on YouTube because someone had said this is wonderful, it should go on YouTube. But then it was later taken down, and I felt that was the right thing to take it down for two reasons. Firstly, because YouTube is available to everyone, but secondly, because I felt that the meditation itself didn't go far enough in the sense, or really kind of focused in what felt to me like more of a moralizing way on me and or on the policeman and the person killed, and me and my reaction to both of them. And it felt too personal to me. It didn't gel with me at all. It felt too personal. But I mean, Beatrice has said that it helped her, and that's fine. But my own feeling, I mean, if I'm going to meet someone who is sometimes difficult and has been difficult in the past, then yes, I do absolutely make sure that I'm connected with my essential nature. But in that, I feel everything is myself. I don't focus on a separate person and say this person is myself. It doesn't feel right to me, and that was just my point. But it's, I mean, that may be an individual thing for everyone. For me, everything is myself. Everything I see, everything I hear, everything I touch, every person I talk to, um, all all the animals I see, everything. I can't even divide it up. They're all myself, and I feel that.
Yeah, so you wouldn't single anything out.
No, I don't single things out. I mean, obviously, practical life in the world. If I'm preparing dinner, which I'm going to do in a minute, I'm going to be cutting up aubergines, and so my attention, there will be a certain singling out of the aubergine, but even then, not totally as an object. There'll be the knife and the chopping board and the aubergine. But all of it myself. So that there's a certain, there'll be, from time to time, there's a certain focus on a more limited field of the objects I'm engaged with.
Jenny,
yes,
maybe he said those things because there was so much hatred against the policeman who did it.
Well, I think he probably did, but it felt too progressive to me, and I felt it wouldn't work for someone completely new coming to YouTube, but I also felt it wouldn't work for people who are going deeply into this teaching. But then Beatrice said it has helped her, so maybe I'm wrong about that.
No, well, Jenny, I wasn't talking about that special YouTube clip. I've seen it, and it was almost, I think he presented it as a prayer sort of thing. But for me, it comes from a completely different background. It's come from my professional life. I've been a criminal judge a lot of the time.
Yes, and of course you're brought up in right and wrong and against the law.
I have a long practice, Jenny, of how the relative and the absolute can come together right there, because it's very possible to deal with the individual actions and never condemning the person or and of course you include all the circumstances,
yes,
and the perpetrator and everything, but there you can stay in the absolute while viewing the person who's standing there, and society wants something to be done with him or her. So
yes, exactly. I can see very much from that perspective and that conditioning.
Combining, but I can be completely aware of that everything I touch or see or hear is what I am, and still a function in this relative universe where I'm sending someone to jail for the rest of his life, and still honoring him as being what he is, the absolute.
Yes.
It's not necessary to. And in the case Richard mentioned, I can so imagine if the moment, the absolute incredible moment that something is killed near you, that it's so vivid, and so that you that just including a bit of the environment, the perpetrator in this way, is already a step in lightening the whole situation. so it's, I don't think it contradicts with what you are saying. Like you want everything you see, you touch, you hear, not just the person who just killed someone, but also the trees, the bystanders, and the cars.
Yes, yes.
And I can also understand that the view is focused on some, like when you're cutting the aubergine,
Mm-hmm.
prevent from cutting your finger. So you're.
Yes, I need to distinguish the aubergine from the finger. That is quite important.
When I'm with certain some skills, would be more or less the same, including as much as possible, but just.
Yes. Well, I think we've had more than 2 hours now, and I think maybe I'm going to go and cut my aubergines. So thank you everyone.
Thank you, Jenny.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jenny.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye, everybody.